What's up, everyone? Welcome to the video. We are here talking week 13 of the NFL season on DraftKings and FanDuel, and this slate is absolutely awesome. There's 3 great games here, over a 50-point over-under, and there's some other good spots as well, so I'm very excited to break this one down. And also, if this is your first time here, what's up? My name is Chris Pennell. I break down NASCAR and NFL DFS each and every single week on this channel. And what I like to do in these videos, specifically for the main slates, we like to go position by position, going over the player pool that I'm looking at currently, although that could change by the time kickoff rolls around with injury news or just changes in my opinion. And also we can build a lineup as we progress through it, more so for a single entry tournament build. And at the end I will run the optimizer to see who's popping the most as of right now with the current projections and ownership projections that I have in place. And if you would like access to that to build your own lineups, link is down below in the description for that. And as always, we will start with the quarterback position. And I do have to mention, if you do want access to the sheets, the projections, cheat sheets, ownership projections, the optimizer, I do cover the NBA each and every single day in a similar fashion. Link is down below in the description or the pinned comment for that if you do want access. Fair prices, and it's the beginning of the month, so it is always the best time to sign up. Anyway, let's talk some quarterbacks here, and I basically picked all the ones from the games I mentioned earlier where we have 3 games with a 50 or more over-under. So we have Patrick Mahomes and Joe Burrow in the 52.5 point over-under game. We have Justin Herbert facing off versus Derek Carr, who I did not add on here. You can if you want, but didn't really want to go that route. 50.5 point over-under. And then we have Trevor Lawrence versus Jared Goff, which I know don't have the punching power name-wise as guys like Mahomes, Herbert, Burrow, even Deshaun Watson, but that game features a 51.5 point over-under with 2 terrible defenses and only a 1 point spread. And then I threw in Deshaun Watson. It's his first game back. Great matchup versus Houston. So lots of ways we can go at quarterback. I do think it's going to be pretty spread out in tournaments. We'll start up top with the man, probably the MVP this year, Patrick Mahomes, $8,300 on DraftKings, $9K on FanDuel, the most expensive QB on both sites, but hard not to like him. I do want to mention first that the matchup's not very good versus the Bengals. They're allowing the third fewest points to the quarterback position, but guess what? I don't care about matchups when it comes to the Chiefs offense or Patrick Mahomes, so I'm simply going to toss that aside. Yes, do I wish it was a good matchup? Sure, but it's really tough to stop Patrick Mahomes, so really don't care how well your defense has played this year. And look at the numbers this season. It's incredible. 325 passing yards per game, over 2.5 passing touchdowns, 8.1 yards per attempt. He's actually been running the ball a little bit too, 25 rushing yards per game. Can't really count on him getting his fantasy points on the ground, but he is capable of doing it if need be. 27.5 point implied team total here. They're on the road in Cincy, 4:25 p.m. game. Yeah, I definitely want exposure here. The problem is these stacks are pretty expensive in this game. Now, there is ways you can make it cheaper, but let's just say, for example, you're using Patrick Mahomes. You're going to want to pair him up with Travis Kelce. You can go with one of the wide receivers, but it's always kind of a guessing game on who's going to go off for the wide receiver position in KC. So let's just say we go with Travis Kelce. We run it back with a guy like Jamar Chase, who's about $8,000. Even then, if you want to move to T. Higgins, he's still in the 7K range as well. So it gets expensive quick. You could go double tight end with a guy like Hayden Hurst, but just know if you are using Patrick Mahomes, those stacks get quite pricey. So we're going to have to find some value. And then Justin Herbert, $7,200. I do think he's going to be the lowest owned of the bunch here. Probably going to be the lowest owned from all these guys I have listed on here besides Jared Goff. I do think he will have more ownership compared to him, but I love this game, and 15.5 point over-under. If we didn't have KC and Cincy, we didn't have Detroit and Jacksonville, I do think this would probably be the highest owned game on the slate, so that's definitely going to take some ownership away, which is very appealing in tournaments. Only a 1 point spread here on the road in Las Vegas. The one thing I don't like about Herbert this year is that he's been checking down a lot, only 6.5 yards per attempt, and that's why Austin Eckler gets 30 targets a game. He's just kind of dumping off there. But this is a great matchup versus Raiders pass defense, who's dead last, 32nd DVA versus the pass, and allowing the 3rd most points per game to the quarterback position. We saw Geno Smith have a pretty solid game versus them last week, over 300 passing yards. And even though Mike Williams is out for this game, he still has Keenan Allen, Joshua Palmer, DeAndre Carter, and Austin Eckler to get the ball to, and don't forget about Gerald Everett at tight end as well. So I do think Herbert's a pretty good tournament play. And if you were playing cash games this week, I think Joe Burrow is one of the top options. I believe I have him and Trevor Lawrence as the highest owned quarterback. So if it really comes down to your roster construction, they're about $1,000 difference in price. I do trust Joe Burrow a lot more. And with him getting Jamar Chase back, that is huge for him because it just really increases that ceiling potential. But love this game. And the cool thing is, if you are stacking, like I mentioned with Patrick Mahomes, if you can't quite afford Mahomes, you can just easily swap out the 2 quarterbacks and it's still the same stack. Like let's say you have Mahomes, Kelce, Chase. you just can't quite afford Mahomes, just swap that out with Joe Burrow, and that still works. So then you have the Joe Burrow with Chase stack ran back with Kelsey instead of it being ran back with Jamar Chase. That's something to keep in mind. The Chiefs have been worse defensively versus the pass, and on the season, Burrow averaging nearly 300 passing yards per game. So I don't think you really need me to tell you to play these guys. It's just a matter of what can you afford. Deshaun Watson, his first game back in 2 years for some unfortunate circumstances for him. But we'll see how it goes. He could be a bit rusty, but this is his first game in a while, but it is at his old stadium in Houston, facing a team he's pretty familiar with, and it's a pretty bad defense. He is without David Njoku, but I don't think it's going to be a huge deal. Harrison Bryant will step up, and I think he could have a decent game. But a near 27-point implied team total at $6,500, Watson's definitely playable. The only concerns I have is either a blowout or they just run Nick Chubb to the ground here, because we know Houston is so bad versus the run, and that offensive line should be able to manhandle a defensive line. But I think Amari Cooper, Donovan Peoples-Jones are decent stacking options with Watson, and you could also go Harrison Bryant if you want to get cheap. Trevor Lawrence, $5,900. If you can't quite afford Joe Burrow in cash, I think this is your next best bet. He's facing Detroit, and they've allowed the most points per game to the quarterback position this season. Dead last, 32nd, 26 points per game, 270 passing yards. It actually have not been very good versus the run as well for quarterbacks. I know Trevor Lawrence isn't really a big running guy, but is averaging 16 rushing yards per game. It's nothing crazy, but he does at least offer you a little bit more mobility than some of these other guys. But numbers on the season aren't that great, but it's really easy to stack this game up. Like Trevor Lawrence, pair him up with Christian Kirk, Zay Jones. It's not a very expensive stack whatsoever. Running back with Amon-Ra St. Brown, who I want to say is $7,100. That is not hard to do. And similar to Burrow and Mahomes, if you can't afford Trevor Lawrence for some reason, even though he's cheap, you could swap him out with Jared Goff, and it would be the same exact kind of stacking. And at $5,300, I don't think a lot of people are going to play Jared Goff just because Trevor Lawrence is going to soak up a lot of ownership. But they have similar numbers in the season, and I think it's pretty interesting because he's going to be low owned, and at home, Jared Goff has really not been that bad. And they have a 26.25 implied team total, which is more than the Jacksonville Jaguars. So if you're just playing the ownership game, I think they have very similar upside. I do like Trevor Lawrence more, but Jared Goff is a very interesting pivot in tournaments. And moving over to our lineup, lots of options to look at. I mean, we could play Patrick Mahomes. I would like to, but I am going to try to save some money. I'm still going to go with the same game, but we're going to go with a Joe Burrow stack at $6,900. Just save a little bit of cash. Great matchup and obviously a great game environment. And then we'll move on to the running backs. And as I've said all season long, I haven't really been one to pay up at the running back position. I will venture into the 7K range, but as far as the 8K backs are concerned, I am not sure I have played any this year. I might have played Saquon Barkley one week just because I had extra money like for a last piece in the flex spot, but I really have not actively sought out these expensive running backs unless it's on like a showdown slate or something. So for me personally, I'm probably going to live in the value range of running back this week once again. But Josh Jacobs is a guy I do have a lot of interest in. He's still in the 7K range. It's close. But I think since we have potential cheap tight ends, cheap quarterbacks, I might be able to afford guys like Nick Chubb and Josh Jacobs this week. But up top, Austin Eckler, $8,500. If you're playing him, he's kind of like a hybrid running back / wide receiver. If you are using Justin Herbert, he is a fine stacking option. It's a very good matchup versus the Raiders. I suck versus the pass. I suck versus the run. There's the very bad defense in general. 23rd DVA versus the run, and giving up the 5th most points per game to the running back position. But get this, they're actually pretty bad versus the pass when it comes to running backs, giving up a lot of catches, which is right up Austin Eckler's wheelhouse. And the guy's got a 22% target share in the season, which is insane for a running back, over 8.5 targets per game. So, and over 7 catches. I mean, you're basically getting a touchdown floor just from catches. So if he gets into the end zone, which he does quite often, over half a rushing touchdown per game and nearly half a receiving touchdown, he is a fine tournament option. It's just a matter of being able to afford him, but I love the game environment. Nick Chubb, $8,000. If the passing game for Cleveland's going to have some ownership, I do like the pivot to Nick Chubb because, I mean, they should be able to destroy the Texans on the ground. And he checks just about every single box. I mean, 7-point favorite, near 27-point implied team total. I'd be very shocked if Nick Chubb does not get into the end zone in this game. The problem is, though, since he does not catch any passes whatsoever, if he does not score, he's not going to pay off. Because even if he does have like 150 yards on the ground, you get the 3-point bonus. That's 18 points. If he doesn't get any catches or doesn't get to the end zone, 18 points isn't going to cut it at $8,000 because a guy like Austin Eckler can catch 9 balls and have 12 carries on the ground and just easily outscore Nick Chubb. So if you're playing him, you have to count on touchdowns, but I'd be kind of surprised if he does not get into the end zone. I mean, I do think the Browns can put up a lot of points, and obviously getting Deshaun Watson back is going to be huge for this offense. Not saying Jacoby Brissett sucked, but I mean, he's actually pretty good in just filling in for Jacoby Brissett terms, but Watson's definitely a different breed there. But the Texans, they suck versus the run. Third worst DVA versus the run, 31st in fantasy points allowed per game to the running back position, over a rushing touchdown per game, and 150 rushing yards. So yeah, if you're ever going to play Nick Chubb, this is about the best spot to do it. Josh Jacobs, $7,900, looking like he might be the highest owned player on the slate. At least that's what I think I currently have, but the projections like him. He's a 1-point favorite at home, and this matchup versus the Chargers, it's pretty good. It's about as good as it is versus the Texans here. 29th versus running backs, 130 yards allowed per game, and 29th DVA versus the run. And coming off a game where he scored like 50 fantasy points, if you're just game log watching, people are going to play him. It's going to inflate his ownership. So I guess there would be a reason to maybe pivot to a guy like Nick Chubb in tournaments who hasn't really been going off recently. So just playing the ownership game. I mean, Chubb over Jacobs makes sense, but Jacobs is more involved in the passing game as he's getting over 4 targets per game this year compared to Nick Chubb with his 6.5% target share. Then moving down to some of the value backs, Travis Etienne is probably my favorite back on the slate. He's only $6,400, and the problem is, like, I want to play a lot of Trevor Lawrence, but at that point, I'm playing guys like Zay Jones and Christian Kirk, so I'm not really sure I want to add in Travis Etienne as well. He can catch passes. It's just getting to a point where I'm playing so much Jaguars, so I think that's why in cash games earlier in the week, I was thinking Trevor Lawrence would be the guy, but I don't think people want to play Lawrence with the pass catcher and then put in Travis Etienne as well. So I think that's why a lot of people try to get to Joe Burrow, just so they're not using a quarterback or running back combination. But loving Etienne, I know he got hurt last week, get you pretty much 0 points. I think he had 2 yards maybe. They said he could return, but they were just being a little bit precautious, but he's going to be fully good to go. And on the season, 5.5 yards per carry. He's been very good with his opportunities, 26th DVA versus the run, 16th versus running backs. And he can catch some passes as well. So I'm thinking he's going to be the chalk running back this week. Josh Jacobs will probably be very similar in ownership, but Etienne will be quite popular. And I love him in cash games. David Montgomery, $6,200. Khalil Herbert still on the shelf. And it's a great matchup versus Green Bay Packers. And in a very similar position, I think 2 weeks ago, or was it last week? I forget. I think it was 2 weeks ago. I don't remember. But anyway, it was a chalky spot. I want to say it was versus Atlanta. And Montgomery had a pretty good game, got into the end zone, and the Packers, they're 32nd DVA versus the run. That's dead last. That's worse than the Texans. That's worse than the Chargers, worse than the Browns. They have been very bad versus the run, 26th versus the running back position. So Montgomery, with no Khalil Herbert, going to get pretty much all the touches back there. I know they have the rookie, is it Ebner? I'm trying to remember his name. It's something like that. He's not going to be a big focal point anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But I do like David Montgomery quite a bit. Then Dameon Pierce, $5,900. I hate the Texans' offense as much as you guys do, but they are playing the Browns' run defense, which is pretty bad and gives up a lot of points to running backs. We're talking the third most per game. If he could just catch some passes and maybe get into the end zone, hopefully, I think he can be in line for a pretty good day below 6K. But if you want to get away from him because he is going to be a little bit chalky, I totally understand that because the Texans offense sucks. And if Deshaun Watson and company can put up a lot of points in a hurry, they might not be able to run the ball as much as they want to, which could kind of phase Dameon Pierce out a little bit. So I think we have to be a little bit careful, but the matchup is nearly as good as it can get, and the price is pretty good. And moving back over to our build, I'm going to try to save a little bit of money here. If we can afford Josh Jacobs at the end, I would have no problem with that. But I do like Travis Etienne a lot at $6,400. And since I don't have Trevor Lawrence, I could stack some Jacksonville wide receivers in still, but I do want to make sure I do get exposure to the Jacksonville offense. So we'll play Etienne. And I do like David Montgomery at $6,200. I forget how many carries he had in the last week with no. Okay, so I forgot about week 12, but week 11 was the one I'm referencing. We had the 17 carries, got into the end zone, 21 points versus Atlanta, and still had 14 versus the Jets last week, which is still pretty good just to not get into the end zone. But Justin Fields is back, which does open up the offense. Yes, it does take some work away from Montgomery, especially if we get on the goal line. We could see Justin Fields steal a touchdown or something, but I still like him quite a bit. And as I always say with the pass catchers, it really all comes down to who we stack in, what quarterbacks we're using, and who is our run back options with those guys. Yes, some guys are fine as one-offs or things like that for cash games, but really it all comes down to my stacks and tournaments. So if you are stacking up this Chargers and Raiders game, I don't have a lot of interest in Derek Carr, but Adams is the perfect run back option with a Charger stack. It gets very expensive because Herbert's over 7K. If you want to use Austin Eckler, he's over 8K. The wide receiver is a little bit cheaper though because we have Keenan Allen at $6,500 with no Mike Williams. And we also have Joshua Palmer at $5,600 with no Mike Williams again. So he's going to be in that wide receiver 2 role, and he's been very good. And only $5,600. So that's where you can save a little bit of money, but I do like running it back with Devontae Adams. He had, 3 or 4 weeks in a row where he had like 30-some fantasy points. Kind of busted last week. Didn't surpass the 20-point threshold. It was kind of the Josh Jacobs show. And if people are going to sway to Josh Jacobs in ownership, they could lower Adams. And obviously you have Jamar Chase returning. So I do look at Adams as a good tournament play. And it's a great spot versus the Chargers. And this game should be pretty fast paced for the most part. The Raiders are a little bit slower, but the Chargers do make it go a bit quicker. Then Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, if you're using Joe Burrow, you basically have to use at least one of these guys because Joe Burrow is going to have a good game, but he's not going to do it on the ground. It's going to be because of Jamar Chase or T. Higgins, more than likely. Yes, Tyler Boyd exists and Hayden Hurst, but more than likely these guys are going to have a big game. It's a great spot versus KC. I'm going to have a hard time fading. Amon-Ra St. Brown, if you are stacking up Trevor Lawrence with his pass catchers or even Jared Goff, he is going to be one of the top options. And if you're playing cash games, Amon-Ra St. Brown is one of my favorite plays on the slate. I think I've been projected for over 20 fantasy points, but some like wide receiver 3 or 4 on the slate. But really good spot versus Jacksonville. Game should be back and forth. Don't see a reason not to like him. And if you played on Thanksgiving, you were very thankful for his output because he got you over 30 fantasy points versus the Bills. And this is a bit of an easier matchup versus Jacksonville. Already talked Keenan. If you're using Deshaun Watson, you probably want to pair him up with a guy like Amari Cooper or Donovan Peoples-Jones down here at $4,900. He's actually been one of the more consistent wide receivers in the NFL this year, adding the fact that we have Deshaun Watson back. I think the sky's the limit for Donovan Peoples-Jones. Do think he's a good talent. But Amari Cooper, he's been great this year, seeing over 8 targets per game, over half a receiving touchdown, 26.5% target share, and a 39% market share of the team's air yards. With Deshaun Watson here at the helm now, I think the ceiling is very good for Cooper, and I'm really excited to see how they play. Christian Kirk, obvious pairing option with Trevor Lawrence. Love him. I don't think he's a cash game must because $6,300 might put you in a weird range as far as your roster construction is concerned, but I do like him a lot if you can't afford him. Terry McLaurin, I'm not super excited about this play facing off versus the Giants. I think this game's going to be kind of ugly, only a 40-point over-under, but with Terry McLaurin, or with Taylor Heineke, he's actually been pretty solid in his career, so I don't mind it, but I probably would rather get to guys like Christian Kirk and Joshua Palmer at similar price points. And Garrett Wilson with Mike White, who is the second coming of, I don't know, Peyton Manning. I mean, it looks great. I know there's some games last year where, well, he started off amazing on that one primetime game. I think it was versus the Bengals, and he kind of fizzled off. So we'll see if that happens here this year, but it's a definite upgrade over Zach Wilson. I will say that for sure. So I think Wilson's in a really good spot here versus Minnesota. Don't expect him to get 2 touchdowns again and nearly 100 yards, but he's still in a very good spot, and the guy's obviously a very talented wide receiver. First-round pick for a reason from Ohio State. Christian Watson. Hopefully we're watching him score some touchdowns again, but that's all it seems like he does. There's no way he can keep up this touchdown pace. Was he have like 5 or 6 in like past 3 weeks now? But Romeo Doubs might come back this week, although I still think Watson is going to be the main guy here. I mean, he has at least a good chemistry with Aaron Rodgers, which if you have good chemistry with Aaron Rodgers, that means a lot in this offense. Now, he did score the big touchdown with Jordan Love last week, but the guy looks good. I mean, he's 6'4", 6'5", 208, and has some decent speed in that one big play. So I don't mind him as a tournament play. Chicago's defense obviously isn't anything too scary. And then if you are stacking up the Browns, Nico Collins is a fine run back option. Brandon Cooks is out. Kalen Allen is the quarterback still, so it's hard to get too excited. But he had some decent targets last week. Did he get double-digit points? I think he might have. But on the season, Nico Collins averaging nearly 50 receiving yards per game on 6 targets. I could see him probably getting close to 10 here. So you don't need much, and he's very cheap. And moving back over to the Bills, since we're using Joe Burrow, we obviously had to find some stacking options with him. There's 2 obvious options with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins here. I'm not sure if we can afford both. It might be a little bit tough to do. I would love to play Chase. The questionable tag still is a little bit scary, so I don't think the ownership's going to be too crazy. But if he plays, I have to assume he's good enough to go because I don't think they're going to risk major injury with Jamar Chase. So we'll see if we can fit it. It might be a little bit tough, but if we plug in Jamar Chase, we plug in T. Higgins, yeah, it really ate into the salary. It's $3,850 remaining per player. Obviously, we cannot afford Travis Kelce in the stack, unfortunately, because if we plugged him in, that's $2,500, which I guess technically it could work, I think, if you use like the free defense and a free tight end. It might get you to 3K wide receiver, but that's just doing a little bit too much. So we got Chase and Higgins. We're going to have a cheaper run back option from the Chiefs here, which it's going to have to be a wide receiver. You have guys like MBS. Kadarius Toney is out. We could also maybe Sky Moore, Justin Watts. It's nothing too impressive here, but we'll find somebody. And moving on to tight ends. Always my favorite thing to talk about, tight ends and defenses. At least we don't have to talk about kickers on these main slate videos. If you have the money for Kelce, play him. He's by far the best tight end in the NFL. It's not even close. Not even Mark Andrews can come close to him. Just the consistency and the ceiling that he offers you every single week and the high floor mean, there's nothing not to like about Travis Kelce. The only problem is he's expensive. So, like in our stack, I just showed you we cannot afford him. Like maybe you can get a 3K wide receiver, but I don't want to do it. Obviously, the guy's an absolute stud, though. Now, getting the more reasonable price tags here with guys that could fit. I don't know if you heard that car beeping. I'm sorry about that. Freiermuth here, $4,300. Good spot versus Atlanta. He just gets consistent targets. Didn't really do much on the showdown. Was it the Monday night game? Sucked. I know it was versus I can't forget if that. I can't remember if that was Sunday night or Monday night. Either way, didn't have a great game, but he's typically pretty consistent. I'll pull up the target shares for you guys because it's probably a little bit more important. But he's seeing 7 targets per game, 20% target share. I mean, this guy's obviously pretty good. Foster Moreau with no Darren Waller. We just want some cheap exposure to that game. I don't blame you there. Got into the end zone late last week. Hayden Hurst, if you're looking for some cheap exposure to that game, and honestly, I wouldn't mind maybe taking out Jamar Chase and plugging in Hayden Hurst. I mean, I obviously love Jamar Chase, and I would not expect any similar production there, but if you're just trying to double stack and get at least exposure to that, I don't mind it. Then Harrison Bryant, $2,700. No David Njoku, so he's going to be the tight end 1. And the guy's not bad. Like, he was a really good receiving tight end in college. He won some award. I forget what it was called, but the guy's good. He scored a touchdown last time David Njoku was out. He didn't really do much else, but $2,700 don't need much. And with Deshaun Watson at quarterback, that definitely makes it look very appealing. And just the knockout defenses really quick. What I like to do is scroll all the way to the bottom and see our first viable defense. So, Rams versus... Yeah, Seahawks, I don't think I want to go that route. Geno Smith has been pretty good. The Broncos defense is not the worst with only a 39.5 point over-under, but they're on the road. They are 8.5 point dogs, but if you're in a pinch, I don't mind it. But the first one that looks actually appealing might be the Steelers defense versus the Falcons. They're on the road. But only 20.5 point implied team total against them. I have them projected for just over 7 points. TJ Watt's back. I don't mind that. Marcus Mariota doesn't really scare me too much. No Kyle Pitts. Not like they have to stop too much defensively. The Giants versus Washington's not terrible. You have the Commanders versus the Giants, which I don't mind either. The Seahawks would be the preferred defense. They're my number 1 defense of the week. And the Ravens, obviously, but I don't really want to spend that much on defense. So just throw in whoever fits. Just make sure they're not going to get blown up. Like, I wouldn't play the Titans versus the Eagles, and I definitely wouldn't play like the Chiefs or the Bengals because I expect the game to be very high scoring. And just to finish this lineup off, we have a wide receiver 3, tight end, flex, and defense. Let's plug in a cheap defense to see what kind of money we actually have to work with. I think the Steelers were the most appealing. We'll plug them in at $2,600. We have 42 left. If we plug in Harrison Bryant for the free tight end, that should open it up a little bit. So we'll plug him in there. That leaves us $5K, which is actually pretty reasonable. And I know Juju Smith-Schuster is... I think, is he $5,500 or $5,700? He'd be the run back option there. I hate to try to really force him. I'm not like in love with Juju or anything, but I guess he's the wide receiver 1. So $4,400. That leaves us with maybe like a Nico Collins. That could work. If you wanted to go MVS, you could go that route if you wanted. But Nico Collins is $4,200. So if you want to plug him in, I don't mind that at all. It's not a bad looking lineup. You have Burrow paired with Chase and T. Higgins, Ram back with Juju. Then we have ETN, Montgomery at running back, Harrison Bryant at tight end, flex, whatever 4K wide receiver you want, and still his defense. Now don't just copy and paste this. It's only Saturday morning, so I'm not sure what I'm going to roll with for sure, but this is mainly just to see what fits as we talk through it. And lineups are pretty flexible this week because as you can see, we easily were able to fit in a Joe Burrow, Chase, and T. Higgins stack, ran back with a guy like Juju and still get some solid back. So it should be a fun week. I'm looking forward to it. Many ways you can go. Think for yourselves and don't just copy and paste what you see on YouTube. And like I said, you went on the optimizer here to see who is popping as of right now. If you want access to it, links down below in the description for that. This does get updated with all the news that we have breaking throughout the weekend and the week. And I already did hit the optimizer run before this, so we didn't have to wait on it. So let me go over to the builds here, and obviously there's a bunch of settings you could use. Not sure if you can see it on your screen, but position stacks, team stacks, player groups, rules, and all that fun stuff if you do want access to it. But anyway, pull up the players tab and see who is popping. So wow, it's a lot of Dameon Pierce. He projects well. Like I said though, you got to be careful because that could go south in a hurry. I would definitely not do that personally. If you are someone that does build 150, please make sure you have your settings put in place and your correlations and things like that. Because if you're using Trevor Lawrence, you want to make sure you get a stacking option there. And sometimes if you don't do that, it obviously won't completely always follow the rules. Like I don't even think, okay, it did pop in Zay Jones there, but it was not a rule for that to happen. But a lot of Josh Jacobs, a lot of Amon-Ra St. Brown, a lot of Garrett Wilson. Looks like the projections like those for the most this week. Freiermuth, Amari Cooper, Trevor Lawrence. Joe Burrow. Yeah, not really too surprised at who's popping here. I mean, Lawrence and Burrow being the two most popular quarterbacks makes sense to me, and I do like all those skill position players. Thought there'd be more Harrison Bryant, to be honest, at 13%, but yeah, let's see the teams that popped the most: the Raiders, the Jets, Jacksonville, Houston, Detroit. Not really too surprised there. Looks like KC is not really popping at all, just raw points wise, which I get because they're expensive. That's one of those things where you have to force it in, but I do understand it because of the price points. Looking at the games that are popping the most, not really surprised there. And the statistics, you can look at that as well. But yeah, I mean, it's always nice when the internal thought process does agree with the projections. Now, there's some things that I do think I would do differently. Like, I definitely want to jam in some Chiefs exposure, but you can certainly set up rules to make that happen. But with that being said, guys, I think that'll be it for the video. So I hope you did enjoy, and if you did, make sure to leave a like down below. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet already. I think I'll be posting my prize picks video later on if you want to check that out. But with that being said, I wish you all the best of luck, and I'll see you all next time.